With this Swift supermini, Suzuki has stayed true to the design of its successful predecessor. But that doesn't mean it isn't a hugely improved small car with lower running costs, higher quality and a bigger cabin. Fiesta-class customers should consider it. Buying a car from a budget brand isn't usually something that anyone does by choice. Yet the cost savings over more familiar options are often hard to ignore, particularly when it comes to superminis. So what if you could pay budget brand prices yet get mainstream quality? Well, that's exactly the proposition that this little Suzuki Swift aims to serve up. Its predecessor was certainly convincing in this way, selling over 1.8 million examples worldwide in its 6 years on sale before this new generation model arrived in 2010. That old car had an almost mini or Fiat 500-like cheekiness that Suzuki wanted to keep. One reason why visual changes to this generation model are pretty minimal. Evolution, not revolution, is the approach taken here, even though everything under the skin is pretty much different. So instead of a shiny new shape for the sake of it, we've got a bigger cabin, cleaner, more frugal engines and smarter safety. All for a useful chunk less than you pay for a comparable Corsa or Fiesta. Does it all stack up? Let's find out. This modern-day Swift might be hard to differentiate from its predecessor from the outside, but once you're behind the wheel, the changes are fairly obvious. It feels a much more grown-up and refined proposition than before. The engines aren't too different though. The diesel is the same Fiat-designed 75 PS 1.3 litre unit, but it's been tweaked for improved emissions. Most sales though will be petrol ones, so the big news is that the old model's rather inefficient 1.3 litre engine has been replaced by a 1.2 with 94 PS that, thanks to a clever variable valve timing system, offers the same power but cleaner emissions. More of that later. Now, this petrol engine's smaller size means that you have to rev it a little higher than was the case with the previous model. It does its best work above 4,000 RPM, at which point refinement does begin to suffer a little. Still, the reward for venturing into the higher rev ranges is performance that's actually very good for a car of this size. Rest to 60 takes 12.2 seconds on the way to a top speed of 103 miles an hour. But it isn't figures like these that really define the driving experience that this car offers. Its short, squat footprint and stiffer body shell provide a good chassis balance that, along with strong grip, powerful brakes and effective body control, means that this is one of those small cars that you really can chuck about the country lanes a little if the mood takes you. It has to be said though that the current Swift age demographic doesn't always suggest a set of buyers likely to want to do that on a regular basis. So for them, there is a more solid feel guaranteed by this car's more substantial platform. You also get a better quality of ride and lighter steering, which, though not quite as feelsome as what went before, is easier to deal with around town. These things are always a bit of a compromise, aren't they? For urban-based motorists, there's a 4-speed automatic option, while at the other end of the scale, for those who are looking for more of a hot hatch experience, or at least a warm hatch one, there's a 125 PS 1.6 litre Swift Sport model. You really do have to be a Suzuki enthusiast to tell this model apart from its 2005 to 2010 predecessor. It's fortunate then that the previous model was stylistically rather forward-thinking, with a chunky cheekiness that initially even had the UK importers adding different coloured roofs and stripes and dressing the car up as a Mini or a Mitre competitor. Wisely, perhaps, those kind of pretensions have largely been abandoned with today's model, a more mature car that is distinguishable from its predecessor by curvier front and rear lights and a rear quarter window, the lower part of which is curved rather than angled. New from the ground up, you really wouldn't know it. But in both 3 and 5-door hatchback forms, this remains a neat piece of design with nice features like the curving bonnet and the blacked out side pillars to create the floating roof effect. The crisp, confident lines shroud a slightly larger car too, 90mm longer and 5mm wider. Dimensional improvements that you should feel from a seat inside. Let's see. Sure enough, here in the rear, this is one of the bigger cabins in the supermini class. A 50mm addition to the wheelbase means that adults, two fully sized adults, can sit in a roomy interior with a tall roof, with enough leg and foot room, and a seat supportive enough even for longer journeys. The car's short tail means that boot space isn't quite as impressive, and the stiffer body shell has necessitated a smaller hatch opening through which the 204 litres on offer must be accessed. Fold forward the 60-40 split rear seats, and this is extendable to 528 litres, though as you can see the load area deck isn't completely flat. Better is the oddment space scattered around the car. There are bottle holders in every door, there's a decent sized glove box and storage space in the centre console. Behind the wheel, though some of the plastics used are a little hard to the touch, you certainly don't get a bargain basement feel, and the chrome trim and neat detailing both look nice. The overall quality has certainly risen by several notches. Though you only get a reach as well as rake adjustable steering wheel on plusher models, every version does get seat height adjustment, so it's pretty easy to find an ideal driving position. And the deeper windows and narrow pillars mean that you get a very good view out. Now, expect to pay somewhere in the £10,000 to £14,000 bracket for your Suzuki Swift, with a £500 premium if you want 5 doors rather than 3. Now, these are figures which, believe it or not, are pretty affordable by supermini standards. If we take the 1.2 litre petrol model that most customers will want, then virtually all this car's mainstream competitors offer less power and cost more. You want examples? What about a 1.25 litre petrol Ford Fiesta with 12 PS less, yet costing £500 more? Or a 1.2 litre Renault Clio that also has 12 PS less and costs £1,000 more? Or even a 1.2 litre Vauxhall Corsa that has 7 PS less and costs £1,400 more? See what I mean? And all of these cars will charge you extra for the ESP stability control system that this Swift includes as standard. To match its value proposition, you've really to go for a bargain brand, and even then, with something like a high-end i20, you'll have to accept less power to match this Suzuki's pricing. So far, so good then. What about standard equipment? Are there compromises to make to match this Swift's affordability? Well, if there are, they're not especially noticeable. This isn't one of those affordable cars that's constantly reminding you of how little you spent. So all models, whether you go for the 1.3 litre diesel or the 1.2 litre petrol engine that I've got here, well, they all come with electric front windows, remote central locking, electric mirrors, and a decent quality MP3 compatible CD stereo with USB connectivity and steering wheel controls. Safety-wise, it's impressive that Suzuki specifies the ESP stability control system across the range, and that you get 7 airbags, including a driver's knee bag. The result of all this was a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating. This Suzuki doesn't stack up at all badly when it comes to running costs. It's certainly not going to send you to the wall when it comes to renewing your insurance premium, while the warranty arrangement is more comprehensive than most when you start to examine the fine print. But though residual values have traditionally been slightly above the supermini market average, this car has usually struggled in the past to match its competitors when it comes to CO2 returns and fuel consumption figures. No longer. In this improved model, you can expect to get 56.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle in this petrol 1.2 and record a diesel-like 116 grams per kilometre of CO2. If you want to better that, then you actually need a diesel, the 1.3 litre variant to be exact, which returns 67 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 109 grams per kilometre of CO2. Does it matter that this Swift looks so similar to its predecessor? Not really. You don't need to spend very long with this version to realise that it's a more grown-up proposition and a much more competitive alternative in its class. You come away from a drive thinking that Suzuki deserves a higher profile than it currently enjoys in the UK. But then, maybe that's the way that Swift owners like it. This isn't a supermini that most of those who'll settle for a Fiesta or a Corsa will ever consider. But it's an alternative they should have tried before signing on the dotted line. Here's an affordable car that doesn't feel like one, and a well-kept secret that doesn't deserve to remain that way.